Ladies, gentlemen, and people who are not ladies and people who are not gentlemen. Andy here. I went from depressed and suicidal to living a life of abundance and joy. If I can do it, you sure as hell can too. Let's talk a little bit about guilt and its role and the purpose that it can serve. And the title is an interesting one. Guilt is a hell of a drug. Are you addicted? It comes from a story in my coaching program, a couple of months ago, where there was a guy who was feeling a lot of guilt about not seeing a particular family member. He hadn't seen this family member in a little while. And this sense of guilt became so overwhelming to him and it consumed him that he stopped texting or messaging this family member entirely. So he hadn't seen this family member in a little while and he was feeling more and more guilty about it. I'm a bad, grandson. I'm not seeing my grandfather enough, blah, blah, blah. And with that guilt and that, I guess, shame that comes with that, he completely shut down and said, okay, well, I feel weird when I even think about my grandfather and I feel all this guilt and this shame. I'm not going to bother even texting. And he obviously felt very negative about this. He had a lot of guilt around this. So, a lot of us encouraged him and said, what if you just reach out and say hello to your grandfather? Like, just reach out, dude. Like, it's not a big deal. He reached out and he was absolutely surprised that his grandfather was just like, hey, it's great to hear from you. Let's catch up. And he ended up talking to him, I think, and they had a conversation where the grandfather was not, there was no ill feelings. It was like completely normal. And so he'd imagined, he'd told this big story in his head of, my grandfather must be so pissed off at me and I'm a bad grandson and all of this. And he'd never actually checked with reality or checked with his grandfather to say, hey, is this story that's in my head even true? Or is it just something that I made up? So I said to him, and I'll read out what I said to him. Good job. See how we often build things up into this big, massive deal. And then when we actually check with the other person, they're often like, nah, it's all good. What are you even stressing about? I never had a problem with you. Maybe you had a problem with yourself or you had a problem with this situation and you projected it onto me. I went on to say to him, guilt can be a hell of a drug. And so for all of you listening, is there a time or can you think about like maybe a time when you've been in a similar situation as this guy? And, I said to this guy, you basically just gave yourself a weird high as if this was some sort of drug, like a weird rush for weeks, like stressing out over this thing. And stress can be a form of dopamine. Stress can be, and drama can be something that we get so caught up in and swept up in that it seems to overwhelm and consume us and we can't see anything else. It's literally like a high. It's like a drug addiction. Hence, guilt is a drug. Are you addicted? And so I said to this client, I know how this feels because I used to do the same thing. I used to get all anxious and caught up in something and, caught up in drama and stuff that really doesn't matter. And I know I won't care about it, 6 months or a couple of years from now. I mean, most of the time you don't care about it like 2 days from now, but, I know I won't care about this stuff in the future. But I'm getting so anxious and caught up in this shit because it feels good in like a weird sort of messed up way. It's a high. It's like a drug. And letting go of this entire game of guilt and shame and should, I should do this, I shouldn't have done this. If you can let go of that entire game, it's incredibly freeing. And so I'll say to all of you, are there any forms of the guilt drug or the shame drug or let's just pick shame and guilt. Is there any form of the shame or the guilt drug that you're currently addicted to? Is there anything in your own life where you're feeling a lot of fear or a lot of guilt, a lot of shame? Maybe even pause the video right now and have a little think about it. Like, where are you holding on to guilt in your own life or shame in your own life? Where are you telling a story that you're bad or that you've done something bad or that you should have done something better or that, you're wrong or that God hates you or that you're a bad person or a bad partner or a bad employee or any of these things? Where is that guilt and that shame sort of showing up in your own life? And where are you beating yourself up with it and telling yourself that you're not good enough or that you're a loser or that the opposite gender won't like you or that you'll never have enough money? Any of these sort of stories that we can often tell ourselves, like where in life are you not maybe letting go of some of that stuff? Is there somewhere in your life where you're not letting go of maybe some mistakes that you feel you might have made? Is there somewhere where you're, feeling all of this shame about who you are as a person? And there are other drugs of choice that we often get caught up in: shame, as I said, and guilt. But another big one is fear. People get addicted to fear. If you're someone that watches the news constantly, like mainstream news, you probably have some understanding of the addictive nature of fear. If you're someone that's often on Twitter and you're getting caught up in drama on there, or you watch YouTube drama and stuff like that, I think you would understand that fear can become addictive. If you read gossip magazines and celebrity magazines and that kind of stuff, you can see the power or the addictiveness of fear. Think about 2020 and then 2021 and then 2022 with lockdowns and all of that kind of stuff. The general population, I'll say 90% of people, were obsessed with fear. It was literally their drug of choice for like 2 or 3 years. Very addicted to fear, very addicted to suffering. And so another one that can become a drug of choice is anger. This is a big one. It's politics in a nutshell. It's movements like, a big part of feminism. It's a big part of the masculine version of that. I guess you could say like Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit, parts of the red pill, that kind of stuff, where people get really addicted to the anger. They get addicted to outrage. There's even a word for it: outrage porn. The news is another really good example of anger as an addiction, anger as a drug. Hating women, and then for women, hating men. Blaming the other side for problems, whether that's blaming the other gender, blaming the government, blaming, XYZ, blaming life, blaming the patriarchy, blaming anything that isn't taking ownership of it yourself. Like that can be an anger addiction. Hating people in general, or hating external events, or blaming other people, or saying that things should be different, or that person should do this, or the kind of left versus right duality or dichotomy that people get sucked into, right? Where it's like conservatives are bad, and then all the conservatives say progressives are bad, and then they kind of just like go at each other forever, and they say I'm right and they're wrong. That's a form of addiction. Getting caught up in that anger, that dichotomy, that me versus them, that can become addictive. Other things that people get addicted to and it becomes a drug: jealousy and envy. That's part of the reason why I don't spend time on social media other than to post my stuff. I don't go and watch other content creators unless it's someone that's positive and stuff like that. But I don't like doom scroll through those apps. I don't go on Instagram and compare myself to other people, because I played that game for a long time. And it only ever left me feeling sad, feeling like they were the other, feeling like I wasn't good enough. Or I would go the opposite and come up with reasons, really they're lies, but I would come up with reasons why I'm better than them. It's what a lot of people do when they're jealous, right? They'll look at someone else and they'll say, oh, she's a slut. Or they'll look at a guy and say, oh, it's easy for him because he's tall and attractive, blah, blah, blah. And you try and come up with ways why you're a better person because it's coming from that deep sense of insecurity. And so jealousy and envy can be an addictive drug that can be very easy to get caught up in. So, I just don't play that game. I don't go there. So there are a couple of different emotions as drugs that we can get very addicted to. Let's talk some solutions. So I think the first one is recognize in your own life when some guilt or some fear or anger or shame or whatever might be clouding your judgment and maybe taking you away from your goals. And a question that I like to ask, which is a question that Alex Hormozi talks about quite a lot, is I will ask myself, is this serving me? As in, is this anger or this fear or this guilt or this shame, is it actually helping me move towards the goals that I have, or is it helping me be the person that I want to be? Does it line up with who I wish to be and who I think of myself? Like, we all have some sort of self-image, like a story that we tell about who we are. And does this fear or this guilt or this anger or this shame, does that line up with that? Am I acting with integrity if I'm getting caught up in guilt and fear and anger? Because the vast majority of people would not say that they want to be angry or that they want to be full of guilt or that they want to feel ashamed. It might look like they want those things because often we get so addicted to it that it's like we just seem to seek it out. And if you're an external viewer, an external observer, you can often look at people and go, man, that person like seems to want to be angry. Like that's how it looks like, or what it looks like from an outsider point of view. But if you ask that person, yo, do you want to be angry all the time? They'd be like, fuck no, it's the other person's fault. They're making me angry. I don't want to feel angry, like it's their problem. And so if you can have the self-awareness to say to yourself, is this actually serving me? Is getting caught up in this stuff actually helping me? Or would I like to try and find another way? In the video course that I just released, so this one here, Play to Win, How I Built a Winner's Mindset, I literally have a chapter where I talk about exactly this. You know, if I'm ever unsure if a story, or you can phrase that as if a belief, if I'm ever unsure if a belief or an emotion is helping me, I will ask myself, is this belief serving me, or is this behavior serving me? If it is, then I keep it. If it not, then I reframe it. So again, I talk more about this in this video course. I'll leave a link in the description below to that. But yeah, I will ask myself, does this belief actually serve me? Is being addicted to this guilt and this anger and this fear and this shame, or whatever it might be, is this who I want to be? Is this my best self? Is this my higher version of myself? And I don't know why you would ever say yes to that question. Again, I don't know anyone who's like, no, I love feeling fear. And it doesn't mean you have to hate the feeling of fear. It doesn't mean you have to like suffer and be like, oh my God, I'm feeling guilty. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? No, but like, what action would I now like to take to move away from that guilt and move to my higher self? So in other words, like I said, I will ask myself, is this addictive pattern of being addicted to guilt or beating myself up, however that guilt or that shame might manifest, is this actually getting me closer towards the goals that I have? Is this getting me closer to being the person that I want to be? And like I said, my answer to that question was always no. I let go of guilt and shame many years ago. There's nothing I really feel guilty about or shame. I can't even imagine feeling guilt or shame at this point. But when I went through that process of learning to let it go, there wasn't a single time where I was like, no, I want to keep being guilty and I want to keep feeling shame. It's like, no, that's not who I want to be. That's not in line with my integrity. On top of that, you can do Byron Katie's The Work. And if you're not familiar with that isn't one of my favorite authors, Byron Katie. You can go to thework.com, and she's got instructions at the very top of the page. If you click 1, 2, 3, and then there's sort of like instructions in there, and she walks you through how to do what she calls the work, which is really just like a way of reframing, or there's many different ways of explaining what it is, but it's an incredibly helpful process at letting go of some of the shame, of some of the thoughts that you might have, of some of the stories that you're telling about yourself. Like, I'm a piece of shit. I deserve to beat myself up. Her process will walk you through asking if that's true and helping you let it go. Can you maybe not beat yourself up and not call yourself a piece of shit? So again, that is thework.com. And her questions are essentially, you ask yourself, is this true? Like, I'm a piece of shit because, I don't know, let's use the example of the client. He was feeling like a piece of shit because he hadn't texted his grandfather. And so the first question is it true that I'm a piece of shit just because I haven't texted my grandfather? Like, can I absolutely know that I'm a piece of shit just because I haven't texted him? Or, you could question something else there of like, do I absolutely know that he's unhappy with me and he hates me? Because that was a thought that he had. He was sort of convinced that his grandfather was like mad at him or angry. And when we gently said to him, can you know that that's true? He was like, well, I can't know that my grandfather is mad at me. So I was like, go check, message him, send him a message and be like, hey, grandfather, how's things? And he did. That was him inquiring and seeing if his grandfather was actually mad at him. As soon as he actually checked, his grandfather was like, hey, what's up? I've missed you. Let's go catch up. So often we believe these lies and we get so caught up in our stories that we're like 100% that it's sure that it's correct. And the only proof that we need that it's correct is, well, the thought is in my head, so it must be correct. And it's like, stop and think how insane that is. Like, you can kind of pause the podcast now and say, have there ever been any time in your life where you were wrong about a thought that you had? Like, have you ever been wrong about a thought ever? Like, have you ever thought something was a certain way and then reality comes along and says, no, you were wrong. And you go, oh, huh. Yeah, I was making an assumption there. We even have a saying about this. If you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So we literally acknowledge that assuming and believing our own thoughts is not always correct. And yet a thought will appear in our head and we will automatically go, yep, that's true. My grandfather hates me. What the fuck is the evidence of that? Well, the thought is in my head, so it must be true. My partner doesn't respect me. Where's the proof? It's in my fucking head. And then we go hunting for evidence that we basically then make up. And yeah, I can have a whole separate discussion about that. But we'll have a thought in our head. We'll automatically assume that it's true. And then we will go and do what's called confirmation bias, which is where you have a thought in your head and you go hunting for evidence that it's true. And so one of my favorite techniques is, can you find any evidence that the opposite might be true? You know, in the case of like, my grandfather is mad at me, is there any evidence that he's not mad at you? Well, he hasn't sent me a text saying that he's mad at me, so that's a little bit of evidence. And then I go out and check and actually try and find some evidence. I send him a message, hey, grandfather, what's up? And he goes, oh, grandson, I'm so happy to hear from you. Oh, shit, there's some more evidence that he's not mad at me. And I could just ask him, hey, are you mad at me because I haven't texted you in a little while? And he'd tell you the truth. You find out the truth in half a second, but we have these thoughts in our heads, and then we make these assumptions that our thoughts must be correct because it's in my head, it must be true. We don't actually fucking check with reality. So yeah, there's so many times we have a thought or a story in our head that we've just concocted and we've never actually fucking checked. So The Work, again, by Byron Katie, The Work, this process of, and she steps you through it on her website, but this process of walking through the work has just been, at least for me and all of my clients, instrumental in me letting go of a lot of emotions that I felt, some negative emotions and stories and things I've been believing, but I've never actually checked to see if they're true. And I've found that every single stressful thought that I have ever thought, when I actually dig deep and check and have a look and see if I can view it through a different lens or see if there's another way of looking at it, every single one, I've been able to find a more positive reframing or a different version of that story. So in my video course, I have an entire chapter on the concept that I just said. Everything is a story and you're in control of the stories you tell. And in this chapter, I literally talk about there's different ways that we can look at the same event, like multiple stories that we can tell about that event. In other words, there's different ways of framing things, right? And so I have found so much peace and happiness in my own life if I tell positive stories that actually serve me, or I try and find some evidence of something positive, rather than getting sucked up and caught in these negative assumptions or negative framings of events or people or myself or any of that. In this same video course, I talk about my favorite book. This one at the top here, You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. It's probably my favorite book the entire point of the book is to get you to focus on the positive rather than focusing on the negative. And that's not about deception or lying or, pretending something is a certain way. It's about looking for the positive rather than just pretending that something is positive. So it's about finding evidence. It's about I guess that's the best way of saying it, finding evidence rather than lying to yourself. And Byron Katie's book, Loving What Is, same thing. Her philosophy very much is let's go and find some evidence of how this could be a good thing or how you could feel positive about this event. In the same video course, I also have an entire chapter called Everything That Happens to Me is Good. And the point of this chapter is all the techniques I've used to find ways of reframing those stories and finding the positive. And I'll leave a link in the description below to this video course. You can pay whatever you can afford, even if that's just $1. Link is down below. But yeah, I guess one extra caveat that I'll add at the end here. It took me quite a long time to let go of guilt, to let go of shame, to let go of fear, definitely, to let go of anger. It was sort of a process, and I wasn't perfect the first, 1,000 times I tried doing the work, the Byron Katie work. I wasn't amazing the first 1,000 times I tried to reframe things in the positive. I have been working on this since I first started overcoming my depression when I was young. So this is something I've been doing for 13 years at this point, you know what I mean? It's taken me a long time to get to a place of peace and happiness and not believing my own stories and not getting swept up in my own addiction to negative or to the lower level emotions. So if this is something that you struggle with yourself, be patient with yourself. I have done the work, Byron Katie's work. I have done that 5,000 times. And positive reframings, which in psychology terms, that's also known as cognitive behavior therapy, I've been doing that since I was like 23. It's something I do like 100 times a day. And I don't have that many negative thoughts anymore, but yeah, I've done this like hundreds of times a day for the last like 10 years. Like it can take a little while to get good with these techniques of reframing and being positive and building that positive mindset, but it is entirely possible. I'm proof of that. I was unbelievably negative when I was depressed. I mean, I was fucking depressed and suicidal for a reason, but I had like 10,000 negative thoughts a day, and I was so convinced that they were true. I was so addicted to my own unhappiness. It was a drug for me. I used to be very addicted to anger. I went through a very strong anger phase, especially with lockdowns. God, like 2 or 3 years ago. I was addicted to anger during all of that stuff. I was addicted to anger during my like red pill phase when I first started learning to date women. I was very addicted to anger about women. Like I was very mad at women and all that sort of stuff. I was super addicted to that. What else was I addicted to? Very addicted to fear. In the early days, I was addicted to guilt and shame. Yeah, I've had a strong addiction to a lot of these emotions over the years, and it's been a process to let go of all of that. So be patient with yourself if this is something you struggle with. Take your time with it. My video course that I mentioned, again, the video course is called Play to Win, How I Built a Winner's Mindset. I cover all of this so much in there. I honestly recommend you just grab the video course. You know, like I said, you can just pay $1 for it, but it's all of this sort of stuff like stuffed into a little video course in a book. So that is all the stuff that has helped me. If you want more help with that, I have coaching. I will let's read out a win that a client had recently. And this guy has given me permission to share this. So he says, my biggest win in June, so this was a while ago actually. My biggest win in June was definitely having an enthusiastic, sexually experienced 24-year-old come straight over to my place to hook up. Made me realize that I can get along super nicely with girls that are around 10 years younger than me. I loved the positive, youthful, and carefree energy that she brought. I felt like this experience effectively dispelled the idea that I'm too old for girls in that age range. Yeah, lots of guys have that idea of like, oh, no 20-year-old would like me because I'm in my 30s. And it's like, hello. What do you think I do? I date women that are 20. I date women that are like 18 to, I don't know, 23. 25, 23. Most of them are younger than, I'm like Leonardo DiCaprio, but like slightly younger. So yeah, you can absolutely date girls of any age. It's just about being honest and authentic and saying, hi, I like you. Do you like me? And then she'll go, no, I don't like you. Okay, then you go to the next woman. Hi, do you like me? I like you. And then she'll go, sure, I like you. Let's go on a date. And you're like, sweet. That's it. It's literally just that. So you don't have to do anything special, but like I said, if you would like more help with any of your goals, I have coaching. Also, that video course, I really recommend you grab that. If you don't want to grab that, that's beautiful too. As always, ladies and gentlemen, go out there and crush those goals. And you're awesome. And guess what? Because you're an absolute legend and you stuck around to the end, you get to hear about my amazing one-on-one coaching deal that I'm offering just for a limited amount of time. Oh my God. That's right. I'm offering one-on-one coaching with me and access to my group coaching program. You get to sit down with me and do a one-on-one call every single week, as well as a group coaching call every single week. You get access to me every single day. You can send me messages. I will get in there. I will build you that amazing life that you have been dreaming of, whether that's sex, whether that's dating, money, relationships, happiness, peace, whatever it might be that you want. Let's make it happen together. And if you pay in full, you get an extra 4 weeks instead of the usual 3 months. Here is just a little bit of what some of our clients have achieved. Taylor had a threesome, tons of sex, embraced honesty with girls he's dating, embraced peace and love, and he's a coach in our program too. Laz, look at this handsome guy, and I'm not just saying that because he's bald. He more than doubled his monthly income, earning $45K a month. He had a ton of sex, embraced honesty, and did so much more. Corky had a threesome, sex with 7 women. We helped him start his own business, and he learned to love himself. And look at that cool BDSM picture. Legend. All of that and more is yours for $20,000, and we have payment plans as long as you pay $10K up front, and we can negotiate the rest of the payment plan. Link in the description below. Click that, mention that you want one-on-one coaching, and let's do something amazing together. Limited time only. This is the only time I'm going to offer this. Let's go, baby.